A tuatahi o te rā tēnei te mihi kia koutou, a ki tēnei wā kua hui mai nei, a ki tēnei rā nō reira tēnā koutou. A tuarua te pouwhakahaere o tēnei rohi, tēnei te mihi kia kōrua, koutou mā tēnā hoki tātou. Ko ari hia tōku ingoa, he mahi ana hau kei te kaihautu o te runanga o Ngai Tahu. Greetings everyone, and after that quite inspiring chat that we've heard from Rod, backed up by our upoko here, we're on the home straight. So this afternoon, it's a real pleasure and a delight to welcome our panel here. And we're actually looking at this whole theme of the Maori economy. So as we've moved right through today, when I think about from the global to climate change to the regional, and actually some of those inspiring, that kōrero that Rod just gave before, I want us to start thinking about how we run that theme of the Maori economy through all of those facets when we think about the redress of energy in terms of decarbonisation. I'll just make a couple of opening comments, and then I'm going to leave the content of the kōrero to our presenters. Our presenters this afternoon, we've got Mike Pohio from Ngai Tahu Holdings, our chair, and also chairs a number of other Māori sectors. Also from Air New Zealand, we've got Tupara Morrison, who is going to focus on decarbonisation and looking at the Air New Zealand program. Andy McFarlane from Fonterra, Director of Fonterra, and Andy's going to talk more broadly around Fonterra's role internationally and also the relationship through the Maori economy. And Anna Allen is also joining us today from Kiwi Rail. All three sponsors of the kaupapa that you have here today, and of course the theme that we started with this morning when our whānau from south here took the stage. This is also about Murihiku Regenerate. So really, what is the Māori economy? And you often hear these sort of nebulous phrases out in the community around, oh, it's worth 70 billion at the moment, it's going to look like 100 billion way out into 2030, and probably, Rod, a lot of that is yours if I think about it. But actually, what is the Māori economy? And today, and a lot of you already partner with Māori, whether it's in businesses, whether it is with the Crown, who are actually working right alongside iwi, papatapu runanga, hapu, etc., or whether it's trusts or incorporations, or whether it is whānau. So the Māori economy is about all of those contributions that go into what actually comes out the end in regards to not only big business, but also whānau. And one of the things that I was delighted about hearing this afternoon was actually that real sense of social regeneration and innovation. And we heard from a couple of our speakers that actually talked to us about what is the point of all of this if you can't bring it back into your society, or if you can't bring it back into your community or into your whānau. It just doesn't make any sense. So the Māori economy is moving from strength to strength. As we watch iwi settling with the Crown, they're not waiting till they've settled with the Crown. Great architects in terms of establishing organisations, establishing the construct of iwi as they move forward, they were thinking about these things generations ago. And so too today, as we see iwi settling with the Crown in many trusts and corporations, organisations, etc., they are at the forefront. And one of the things that you've heard repeatedly here today is actually it's about the circular economy in terms of not only what goes in terms of the financial acumen, the social acumen, the cultural acumen, and the environmental acumen. It's actually about what that is going to do in terms of our tamariki and our mokopuna and enable them to be positioned as we move forward. I really also just want to fuse that with the dynamics of actually what the essence of Maori Hiku Regenerate is about. And all of those circular, or what I call ecological aspects of bringing well-being to the community is actually the role of Maori Hiku Regenerate in terms of building communities, building that circular economy, looking at social regeneration, research and science and innovation, and most importantly, those education programs that I know a lot of our young people, our teachers, etc., were benefiting from tomorrow. So there are a couple of things that sit on my frontal lobe when I think about the Maori economy, and I'd like you to be thinking about as we just finish this last session this afternoon about if you're already contributing to the Maori economy, if you're in an organisation, company, or you're in a business, actually how can you be contributing to partner alongside Māori to continue to build that Māori economy? Because when you're building the Māori economy, you're building the broader economy of society. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to ask our presenters to come forward. Mike, I'm going to ask if you could just come along and just give us a little bit of background from the Māori economy point of view. Kia ora.
E raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Mike Pohi o tōku ingoa, and I'm here as chair of Ngāi Tahu Holdings, a great privilege that I have in that role. And Arahia is exactly right, is that we need to think in the context more widely than the post-settlement iwi. That is, the trusts and incorporations, the whānau and post-settlement iwi are just one part of that wider framework and that wider collective. In that regard, as post-settlement iwi, I have the privilege of being here for just a very short while on a relatively slightly longer, but still in the context of time, a very short period for Ngāi Tahu Holdings. I give great thanks to those that have been before, those that have established us, those that have enabled us, particularly Tā Tipani and those that supported you in the settlement. So the period of time that I'm just talking about is from 1998 till now. And we are exemplified with others. And if we just go to this next slide, the migration from one context to another, from where we've been to where we are now. So initially just focusing on short-term cash, but to where we are now looking at sustainable, deliverable returns. And you can work your way through the list of where I see that we've come from as post-settlement iwi to where we are today. And I think there are many dimensions. One quite significant is that last point, that in those initial phases of establishment, telling a story to telling our story, to being more connected with our communities, to looking at who we represent and how it is that we can support those that enable what it is that we do, and to give returns to those that are important to us. That second to last point there, isolated and outward looking, we have been trying to connect in a number of ways over the years with a number of partners. And it's fantastic to be here with you today. And Terry, Mike, those that have enabled this to come together. It's another way in which we can make those connections and work together. And when I talk about connected and internally engaged, that is the support that we are looking to give increasingly more with our Papatipi Runanga. So we stand here particularly in support of our southern Murihiku Papatipi Runanga. So we go beyond that economic and into the social, and what is it that we can do. Now, just a few stats. Yes, out of here, there's talk about the wider Maori economy being 70 billion or thereabouts. I'd contest that actually, because our revenue is around 300 million a year. And if you just take us over 20 years, there's 6 billion in the way in which we connect in the wider economy. So the numbers, I think, tell a story of how interwoven we are, how in the types of businesses that we undertake, we have a diverse range of interests, and there's number 2. For a diversified portfolio, yes, we have a very strong interest in tourism and farming and fishing and property and honey, but we have this increasing requirement to connect in a more diverse way in the economy. So this latest initiative we are very, very supportive of and have been for some time in terms of what is happening here for Murihiku region to be an innovative energy centre of excellence for Aotearoa. That's what I would like to just actually do an introduction for the last slide, which is why we're here. It is for us and our children after us. This is the whakatauki, or the Ngāi Tahu's embodiment of what it is there for. So through that commercial connection that we have as a post-settlement iwi, this is why we're here. I think this is why the panel's here. This is why we are all here, to see some progress. And I'm very heartened and encouraged by Rod. Just do it. And when we think about those steps that we're making, incremental is not going to get us there. So, kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Mike. Ko Andy McFarlane. Oho, ko hui rapa, taku mankua, ko hakaderi, taku awa, ko Ashburton aho. I live on the under the shadow of Mount Hutt, farm under the shadow of Mount Hutt, and farm on near the banks of the Ashburton River. Look, just before I hook into it, I just would like to recognise, as a Fonterra director, the key partner and shareholder in Fonterra that Ngāi Tahu is. I'd also like to just call out Rod and Tipene now on their comments on water storage. I've spent 42 years in the professional space thinking of smart ways to use stored water and smart ways to turn it into money for the New Zealand benefit. And I think a call out in favour of what we can do is well overdue, because it's become a bit of a negative rather than a positive. What I would, I'll just, a food producer's global purpose. Just before I dive into Fonterra briefly, I'd just like us to stand back with some context, because what are we in business for as food producing entities? We are actually in the business of providing more nutrition, and increasingly today we're also looking at health, well-being and medicine from the same amount of food with a significantly lower footprint, while being respectful of human and animal rights. We also need to be very well paid for achieving that goal, as we have to invest heavily for the future. And just to give you an idea of the capex that we have ahead of us, we're expecting to spend at least $1.5 billion on capex in Fonterra, which is all in the area of reducing our footprint between now and 2030, and that number's going up by the day. We also need to contribute to affordable nutrition to maintain a balance in global geopolitics, essential nutrition and social structures. That should go without saying, but politicians are fond of saying we only have to feed the wealthiest 40 million people in the world. Well, guess what? We don't have access to them, and our market is the middle class. Just like to then go to Fonterra to say, why is Fonterra in business? Well, Fonterra utilises collective capital in an intergenerational manner that's producer-owned entity of strength. Sounds a bit like an iwi, doesn't it? We have to deliver a globally competitive milk price. On top of that, we need to deliver a healthy earnings on top of that commodity price at a commercial return on capital, so that we can invest in further, and to do that we need to invest in further processing and market penetration. And thirdly, and this is the one that's often forgotten, we need excellent risk management capability on behalf of our members and stakeholders. And some of that risk management is very tactical and short term, might be managing exchange rate, interest rates, fixed milk prices, etc. But increasingly, a lot of my time's taken up by taking the 15 to 20 year view or even longer and saying what are the big problems or what are the big opportunities that are coming down the track that we need to identify now, because that might entail some very hard conversations. And I can certainly say we've had some tough conversations with our shareholders in the last 2 years, and we're in the middle of another one of those right now around Scope 3 emissions. So we have, in terms of those emissions, we have really two sources of what I'd call system leakage. And it's not just gases up, it's nitrate down, phosphate across, sediment and rivers. Our processing sites and the supply chain, which in carbon terms would be Scope 1 and 2 emissions, and Scope 3 emissions, which is on farm. And of those, we have about 9% of our emissions come from the processing sites, Scope 1 and 2, and about 91% on farm. And that's the big challenge. So what are we doing about it? Well, the first thing is we are approaching this with what we would broadly call a regenerative mindset. We're being positive about what we've got, not defensive. And the reason for that is that depending on who you talk to, we are somewhere less than half the global average footprint for milk, somewhere less than half. However, we're only about 20% ahead of our nearest competitors in Denmark and Ireland, but would be the two closest competitors. So we're not resting on our laurels because we know we have to do quite a lot. The first thing is to make sure that we get the income side right. So we're investing over $1 billion in future food and food for dairy for medicine, dairy for health to get the income side right. We're then looking at front end investment in the processing sites. That's the 9%, and that's very topical around here because our biggest footprint by far comes from coal. But before we just get out of coal into the next least polluting thing, we need to actually work out how we reduce the footprint, the demand for energy, rather than replacing the existing energy. So earlier on it was mentioned about high capacity heat pumps, for example. So our plant out at Gore, and Richard will talk a little bit about that tomorrow, we probably are only going to need 2/3 of the megawatts we currently have with the new technology we can install before we start replacing the coal. The second thing is, how does our product mix look? Because some products, i.e. milk powder, are more energy intensive because we have to produce steam than other products that we don't. And so, given we've got a static milk pool, we're looking to maximise the low intensity, high value end of the milk stream. So we move on from Scope 1 and then we say, well, what's our biggest problem? 91% of our emissions come from the animals on the farms. How do we crack that methane problem? And it's in its very simple form. We're trying to break the relationship between food in to the animal and the methane out. And what we've decided is that we can't do that by ourselves. It's both a global issue and a New Zealand issue. And so therefore, we've got a coalition of the willing to collectively band together our funds for research around in the climate, I call it the Methane Fund, the Climate Action on Agricultural Emissions Fund. We're working with competitors within our space and across sector. So you've got Ngāi Tahu, ANSCO, which I'm a director of, Silver Fern, Ravensdown, and I missed one out, Ravensdown and Rabobank. So we're looking to do that together. And then further than that, we're having to put quite a large investment into farmer-facing work, which is through the farm source model, because we recognise that change management is actually quite difficult. And if in areas of New Zealand where we're doing the same thing on farm, we're only doing the same as we've done for the last 5 years, change goes as a given. If you're doing the same thing as your grandfather or great-grandfather, change management's a lot more difficult. So we're recognising that we've got a big difference that we have to deal with in terms of how we take our people with us. So that's enough from me, and thank you for the opportunity over here.
Tā tipene, tēnā koe, ngā mihi kia koe i rangatira. Nai tahu, ngā mana whenua o Murihiku, tēnā koutou. I ngā mātā waka no ngā haue whā, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Manukura o Kaunihira, me Clark, tēnā koe. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora tātou. Tupara Morrison, born and bred Rotorua, Ngāti Whakaue, now living in Tamaki Makaurau, and recently, and when I talk recently, 7 months in the job, Māori Development Lead for Air New Zealand. And very pleased to be invited down here today, Mike, thank you very much, to, I guess, share with you the Maori Economy connectivity that we're looking to drive at Air New Zealand. And what those opportunities are. And I'd like to acknowledge Georgia Carey's, who works in our airline strategy, particularly around our next generation aircraft, who's here to support with any technical questions people might have later on. But really, the important thing that Air New Zealand has is it actually has this roadmap through to 2050 around decarbonisation. Great to hear you talking about the emissions in Fonterra. Can't beat an airline for emissions. So really we have to do something. And so we've put the challenge to ourselves. We're committed to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And we've got a 2030 reduction target. And if you look there in terms of our decarbonisation potential, 50% of that comes from looking at sustainable aviation fuel, and 20% around our next generation aircraft, either future hydrogen or battery or hybrid aircraft technologies. And so our requirement for renewable energy as an airline and that generation for aviation within New Zealand is really important. And it's been great to be here today to hear the focus that Murihiku Southland has on perhaps being an renewable energy capital for New Zealand, and we want to be part of that. The opportunity is that New Zealand is ideally suited to adopt zero emissions aircraft technologies. The network, in terms of short range flights, that our Q300s are able to travel, and we can have next generation aircraft that operate in that, and about 60% of our turboprop flights travel less than 350 kilometres. We've seen with the Cyclone Gabriel down on the East Coast that the impact that those weather events can have on normal ways of connecting people. We were very keen, and Air New Zealand acted as quickly as it could to get airline services back into Gisborne and Napier. And so we think that the opportunity there of looking at our next generation aircraft will assist with those mobility substitutes. And then it's looking at this access to renewable energy, which people have been presenting to us today. In terms of the aircraft project, so phase one is looking at a goal to be one of the first airlines in the world to fly a commercial low emissions flight, aiming from 2026. We've gone out, we've looked for long-term partners, we've got 4 prototypes. I'd like to thank Stuart Harris, if he's still in the room, for the little overview that he gave for us in his presentation. And as we move from 2026 to 2030, that's where our breakthrough goal of getting this commercial demonstration happening and that aligns with the opportunity for us to replace our Q300 fleet with next generation aircraft. The key slide here is that due to our next generation aircraft, there are three main potential opportunities with energy supply and distribution shift from aviation. One is an increase in national demand of renewable electricity. So there's multiple industries that will be looking at decarbonising in the future. The high electricity demand drives upgrades to distribution networks, and we've heard of the work that the network providers are looking at in terms of that. And then this potential creation of a new industry in hydrogen production. And across those supply chains in terms of a replacement of aviation fuel for renewable energy sources, I see that the connectivity that we need to make into the Maori economy is creating opportunities which we can all work together on. Air New Zealand has seen it as important that we need to lift our connections with the Maori economy, and we're already having discussions. In fact, the reason that I'm down here today was a conversation that Mike and I had late last year around this, what's happening down here in Murihiku. And we became very interested in how we as Air New Zealand, as a national carrier, can connect to the work that's being done here around renewable energy. And we want to see what are the opportunities to partner with people down here for Air New Zealand. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa. E te whare e tu nei, tēnā koe. E te papa ki waho, tēnā koe. I ngā mate haere, haere, haere atu rā. I ngā mana, i ngā reo, i ngā iwi o te motu. I ngā hau e wha. Rangatira mā, tēnā koutou. Te hau kāinga, tēnā koutou. Nō hawara ahau, ko Anna Allen tōku ingoa. Kia ora tātou. Tātou. Goodness. Kia ora everyone. My name's Anna Allen and I'm the Executive General Manager of Property at KiwiRail. I was a step in at the last minute from Helen in the program. She has COVID, so we're very pleased that she is not here and tucked in at home. Now, I don't know what KiwiRail has done to get the last speaker in the last session of the day, but whatever it is, I'm here to make amends. So I only have for everyone's enjoyment, I only have 2 slides. So here we go. So here to talk about the Maori economy. Now, Maori have been in New Zealand for millennia. KiwiRail have had an iwi engagement team for not quite 2 years. So we are catching up to the play here. But we have the iwi engagement team that sits in the property team. We have in 2 years grown that team to 6 and about to be 7 people. We've been really lucky in KiwiRail to have a really strong Māori internal network called Te Kupunga Mahi, which has been around since 1989 and is all throughout Aotearoa and a real strength in our KiwiRail whānau. So when thinking about the Māori economy, it leads us often to projects as a start. We've engaged with iwi over, consenting and various things like that. But what we're trying to do at KiwiRail is to really have some more meaningful and true partnerships with iwi. And as part of that, we've got our investment and development strategy, which you'll see here, talks about, co-investment, where it's not just we come to iwi when we need something done, we actually work together. And I've been really lucky in my time at KiwiRail to lead some of these developments, and we're about to sign one of our first deals to actually get our first joint venture partnership up off the ground with iwi. So I'm really proud to say that that's the first of many. So we have got, you can see these beautiful pictures that we've got here are all the development opportunities that are ripe within KiwiRail. We've got a lot of land that is underutilised, that has been underinvested for years. And in order to deliver to New Zealand the decarbonisation and the connectivity and the shift of people and freight, we need to start doing more around these sites. And there's as a start in that development piece within our own control, we're committed to developing and co-investing in this with iwi where we can. So as you can see, there's lots of KiwiRail opportunities, but that's not only where KiwiRail can play. In things like the conversations today, and as you can expect all throughout Aotearoa, there are a lot of partnerships, projects that KiwiRail can come to the party with. And it was really interesting to hear Dr. Michael Stevens this morning say that we're all in this together, and I absolutely agree. And I'm really heartened to see that in projects, not only with iwi, but throughout Aotearoa where we're seeing cross, government, cross, state-owned enterprises, everyone coming together to actually make a difference for our communities and for our whānau. We're really pleased. KiwiRail, I'm here with two other people from KiwiRail, Duncan Roy, who's a good Southland boy, and Gary Whale. So if you see any of us around, feel free to have a chat with any of us about any opportunities that you know of, because KiwiRail are really keen to be involved in this opportunity. As you can expect, we're a user of energy, we're a transporter of energy, and we're a developer. So we're really pleased to be here at the table. And this is just a bit of a case study from an iwi, a really strong iwi KiwiRail, or should I say mana whenua KiwiRail partnership. So this is IREX, which I asked what that stood for, and it is Inter Island Resilience something, is what I got today. So it's not an exact acronym, but it's basically what it is. It's our new ferries that are coming in a couple of years. So it's our new ferries and terminals, which will make a massive difference to the connectivity between the two countries, moving freight, much larger amounts of freight and people, and the resilience that brings to all of our networks. So KiwiRail entered into a terms of reference with the three parties here, Te Runanga o tō rangatira, Taranaki whānui ki te ōpoko o te ika, and Te Atiawa o te waka a Maui Trust. So this is a true partnership. It's a governance group. It's design where everyone is involved. It's consenting, it's construction, but it's also operations. It's actually taking this project and not taking it as a standalone project, right? Done the karakia, done the, cut the ribbon and carry on. It's actually where mana whenua will be involved in our operations. And it's been really interesting for my team to go through this, because we've had a real change, a real shift in the way that we look at things. So instead of thinking about the customer, we think about manuhiri and all the things that come with that. And it's been a real awakening for different ways of being able to look at projects. And again, going back to, sorry, I was listening to everyone else's, but to Dr. Stevens said that New Zealand is starting to look like old New Zealand. And that really resonates with me, because taking that step back and looking at the environment and at those long-term thinking, as we spoke about earlier, our children, our tamariki, and people that will come after that. I think it's really important that we start looking at projects in that context. And I know I'm really lucky to be in a rail business, because we do have a very long-term vision. It's not a development today, we're going to make money and move on tomorrow. So, ngā mihi kia koutou, I will not hold you up any longer. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā kātou katoa. Kia ora.
O tēnā ki tātou, and to our panel, Mike, Andy, Tupara, and Anna, thank you for sharing your kōrero this afternoon. And most importantly, the organisations or the companies that you do represent, and the thoughtfulness in terms of what you're setting out to do, not only just recently, but in years gone by, and actually what you're looking at in terms of the future roadmap of decarbonising all round. So my appreciation to you all this afternoon. Look, it is, we are on that home straight, and dare I risk, you've got some fantastic speakers here representing some of those largest companies across Aotearoa. An opportunity for any questions, please. There we go, I can see now. Oh, kei a koe. Regina.
Kia ora. Is that on? Can you hear me? Okay. A question for the gentleman from Air New Zealand, please. So when you showed your slide for the decarbonisation plan, I noticed that the largest proportion, 50%, was planned for synthetic aviation fuel. I was wondering whether you could comment on how you see opportunities for that for Morihiku, perhaps, or the rest of New Zealand. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you for the question. We're currently getting a feasibility study done with support of MB at the moment, and one of the opportunities that has come up has been the use of wood waste in the production of sustainable aviation fuel. From my perspective, and certainly being from the Central North Island, those opportunities of Māori who own forestry land or Māori who own forests is an opportunity that we're interested in, how we bring iwi into those conversations with us around testing that feasibility, for sure.
Ka pai. Just over here.
Look, thank you for sharing that. I just want to follow up. We had a wonderful education day yesterday, but one of the things that came up from the teachers, they were asking how can we learn about good examples of Maori innovation and businesses and employment where people are engaged. So any way that we can publicise more of that would be really useful, because teachers are wanting to make sure that we're incredibly strong and good role models of Maori success in business that would inspire our young people. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that, and I think that's something to pass on to the Ministry of Education in terms of their relationships with not only iwi but those organisations. Kia ora. Yeah, there we go. Answered your own question. Over here. There we go. Okay, I think we're just about there. No. Well, look, thank you, everybody, and I think it's been an opportunity, just before we hand this back to the chief organisers of the day, an opportunity for us to hear that relationship with the Maori economy. And one thing that I just want to close with in terms of the kōrero this afternoon is my real appreciation for everybody who has come up here today, your mihi and te reo Māori. And I think that's absolutely fabulous from where we've come from historically to where we are now. And also a little plug to take it to the next step to work on the pronunciation. Kia ora.